Captain May Nakamura stood at the viewport of the Star Wanderer, watching the swirling gases of the Horsehead Nebula paint cosmic shadows across her ship's hull. The merchant vessel's regular trading route had become routine over the past 3 years, but something about today felt different. The nebula's magnetic interference always played havoc with their sensors, but the readings they were getting now made no sense at all. Captain, her first officer, James Torres, called from his station. "We're picking up what looks like a distress beacon. Signal's weak, but it's definitely not one of ours." May drummed her fingers on the console, a habit she developed during her academy days. "Show me." The holographic display flickered to life, showing a pattern she'd never seen before. The signal pulsed in an elegant mathematical sequence that was too precise to be natural. "How far?" "About 3 hours at standard drift. It's coming from the nebula's edge, near the radiation belt." May nodded, already calculating the risks. The radiation belt was nasty, the kind of place most ships avoided. But if someone was in trouble out there, plot a course, and get Kai up here from engineering. We might need her expertise with the shields. The Star Wanderer altered course, its massive engines humming as they pushed against the nebula's magnetic field. As they drew closer, the ship's sensors began picking up more details. The vessel in distress was unlike anything in their database, its hull composed of crystalline materials that seemed to pulse with internal light. "Life signs?" May asked, leaning forward in her chair. "Faint but present. Environmental systems appear to be failing. Their radiation shielding is completely down." Torres looked up from his readings, concern evident in his expression. May was already moving. "Prep Rescue Team Alpha. I'll lead personally. And someone get me a radiation suit." "Captain," Torres started, "the radiation levels out there are within human tolerance for short-term exposure," May finished. "We can handle 15 minutes without suits if we have to. They might not have that long." The rescue operation launched with practiced efficiency. As May's team approached the alien vessel in their shuttle, they got their first clear view. The ship was beautiful, like a carved diamond floating in space, its faceted surfaces refracting the nebula's light into rainbow patterns. They found the airlock easily enough, though it took Kai several minutes to interface with the alien technology. When they finally stepped inside, their helmet sensors screamed warnings about the radiation levels. The alien ship's interior was bathed in a soft, purple light that pulsed in rhythm with what might have been emergency beacons. They found the crew in what appeared to be a central chamber, 5 beings that looked like they were made of living crystal, their transparent bodies clouded with what Mai assumed was distress. The universal translator took a moment to decrypt their language. "Cannot survive. Radiation levels critical." May made a quick decision. She unsealed her helmet, ignoring Torres's sharp intake of breath. "We're here to help," she said clearly, letting the translator do its work. "We can get you to safety." The aliens' crystalline forms flickered with what might have been shock. One of them managed to speak, its voice like wind chimes in the translator. "You, remove protection. The radiation will take about an hour to reach dangerous levels for us," May explained, already moving to help the nearest alien up. "We evolved on a world bathed in radiation. A little exposure won't hurt us." The aliens' disbelief was palpable as the humans efficiently evacuated them, working quickly but carefully in the radioactive environment. When the last alien was safely aboard the rescue shuttle, May noticed them huddled together, their crystalline forms vibrating in what the translator suggested was intense discussion. Later, safely aboard the Star Wanderer, May would learn that she had just made first contact with the Zalaxians, a species known throughout their sector for their advanced technology and careful, methodical nature. What she didn't know was that footage from her rescue team's cameras was already being transmitted across the galaxy, causing quite a stir in the Galactic Council. After all, what kind of species casually walks into radiation that would kill most life forms? What kind of beings evolved to withstand something that most species considered an absolute barrier to life itself? The answer, as the galaxy was about to learn, was human beings. and this was just the beginning of their surprises. Lieutenant Isabella Rodriguez adjusted her cloaking field for the third time that hour. The autumn rain in Seattle shouldn't have affected her advanced galactic technology, but Earth's peculiar electromagnetic field had a way of interfering with even the most sophisticated equipment. From her perch on the apartment balcony, she continued her observations, dictating notes into her neural recorder. Day 47 of human observation. Subject family continues to display concerning behaviors. The juvenile members have again engaged in voluntary exposure to inclement weather, participating in what they call puddle jumping. The parent unit makes no attempt to stop this potentially dangerous activity. Most alarming is their apparent enjoyment of the cold water exposure. Kaptal, her supervisor, had warned her about maintaining emotional distance during her observation mission. But after nearly 2 months of watching humans, Isabella found herself increasingly fascinated rather than frightened. The archive footage from the Star Wanderer incident had prompted this detailed study, but what she was discovering went far beyond simple radiation resistance. Movement caught her eye as the apartment's owner, Nina Chen, returned from her morning run. Despite the near-freezing temperature and rain, the woman had spent 40 minutes maintaining an elevated heart rate that would have sent most species into cardiac arrest. Even more remarkably, she was smiling. Isabella's recorder captured every detail. Subject displays standard human post-exercise response: elevated temperature, increased endorphin production, mild dehydration, yet appears to be experiencing pleasure. Continuing pattern of voluntary stress inducement for psychological satisfaction. Nina walked inside, and Isabella shifted position to maintain visual contact through the apartment's windows. The woman's next actions added to the growing list of bewildering human behaviors. She consumed a beverage containing caffeine levels that would paralyze smaller galactic species, then began what appeared to be recreational mathematics on her quantum engineering homework. The day progressed with its usual mix of the mundane and the extraordinary. Nina spent hours solving complex equations while absent-mindedly eating food containing capsaicin, a neurotoxin that humans had somehow turned into a culinary preference. She played with her pet, a predatory creature called a cat that humans had domesticated through sheer force of will and endless patience. Then the storm hit. Isabella's cloaking field fluctuated dangerously as lightning split the sky. Her species was extremely sensitive to electrical discharge, and the primitive Earth weather control systems had failed to prevent this atmospheric disturbance. She needed to retreat, but her mission parameters required continuous observation. The field flickered again, and suddenly Nina was staring right at her. Before Isabella could react, a massive lightning bolt struck the building's lightning rod. The surge overloaded her cloaking device completely, leaving her exposed on the precarious balcony as wind and rain lashed at her environmental suit. She froze, her species' instinctive response to danger taking over. But Nina was already moving, pushing open the balcony door against the wind. "Hold on," she shouted over the storm. "The railing's not stable in this wind." Isabella tried to explain that she couldn't move, that her species locked up in crisis situations, but only managed a terrified chirp. Understanding flashed across Nina's face, and without hesitation, she stepped onto the storm-whipped balcony. "It's okay," Nina said, slowly approaching. "I've got you. Just let me help." The human's hand was impossibly warm when it grasped Isabella's arm. With remarkable strength, Nina guided her inside, away from the storm. Isabella's translator finally managed to form words. You're not afraid." Nina laughed, already wrapping a blanket around Isabella's shoulders. "Of an alien appearing on my balcony. Please, I've seen weirder things in graduate housing. Are you okay? That lightning strike must have fried your cloaking tech." As Nina calmly made tea and called for an emergency tech repair service that apparently handled alien equipment without question, Isabella made her most important recording. Yet, humans don't just survive adversity. They actively seek to help others through it. Their response to the unknown isn't fear, it's curiosity and compassion. Update to previous assessment. We may have severely underestimated the most crucial aspect of human capability, their capacity for acceptance of the extraordinary. In her apartment high above Seattle, Nina Chen had no idea she'd just changed the course of galactic history. She was too busy trying to convince her cat that their new alien guest wasn't a toy. Carla Patel's schedule in Nexus Station's medical bay was already chaotic when the proximity alarms began to wail. She was elbow-deep in a delicate procedure, carefully adjusting the crystalline matrix of a young Zalaxian's damaged core. The same species Captain Nakamura had rescued 3 months ago had become regular visitors to the station, fascinated by human medical practices. "Doctor," her AI assistant chirped. "Station security reports 3 unidentified vessels approaching." No response to hails. Carla didn't look up from her patient. "Notify Director Chen, and get me a status report on our refugee ward. If those ships are who I think they are, we need to be ready." The refugee ward housed 300 civilians from the Proxima conflict, including several dozen children of various species. Raiders had been targeting refugee convoys for months, and Nexus Station's location made it an obvious target. She completed the final adjustments to her patient's core. "There. Good as new, little one. Now let's get you somewhere safe." The first explosion rocked the station just as Carla reached the refugee ward. Security barriers were already engaging, but she could hear weapons fire in the distance. A group of Meridian children huddled in a corner, their bioluminescent patterns flickering with fear. Dr. Patel, one of her nurses, Raj, rushed over. "Raiders have breached Level 3. They're heading for the residential sectors." Carla's mind raced through options. The refugee ward's defenses were good, but not good enough if the raiders had heavy weapons. They needed time. "Raj, begin evacuation protocol Delta. Get everyone to the inner sanctum." She pulled up her medical interface, quickly typing commands. "I'm rerouting emergency power to the shield generators. That should buy us some time." A second explosion, closer this time. The raiders were using thermal charges to breach the security doors. Carla felt her pulse quicken, adrenaline sharpening her focus. She grabbed a medical kit and ran toward the sound of fighting. The scene in the corridor was chaos. Station security was engaged with a group of raiders in powered armor. What they hadn't expected was to find a human doctor running straight toward the conflict. Carla's first thrown medical scanner hit a raider's helmet with surgical precision, shorting out their visual display. Her second throw was a neurostimulator calibrated to emit a pulse that overloaded their armor's sensor systems. "Fall back," she shouted to the security team. "Get to the refugee ward. I'll hold them here." One of the raiders laughed. "One human, against all of us." Carla smiled. The expression made several raiders take an involuntary step back. "You really should have studied human medical history. We've spent thousands of years learning exactly how our bodies work." She pulled a small device from her medical kit, which means we know precisely how to push them beyond normal limits. The device hummed as she pressed it to her neck, injecting a carefully calculated cocktail of stimulants and performance enhancers. Her pupils dilated, time seemed to slow as her enhanced nervous system processed information faster than normal. What followed would later be described in radar bars across the sector as the incident. Security footage showed Carla moving with impossible speed, using her intimate knowledge of xenobiological weak points to disable attackers with terrifying efficiency. When a thermal charge detonated nearby, she simply ignored the third-degree burns, continuing to fight while her nanite-enhanced healing factor began repairs. The raiders' retreat became a rout when they realized that wounds that should have been fatal barely slowed her down. Their final transmission mentioned a demon in a lab coat before they fled the station. Hours later, as emergency teams secured the station, Carla sat in her medical bay, calmly stitching up her own injuries while directing the care of others. A Meridian child brought her a cup of coffee, its bioluminescence now glowing with patterns of admiration rather than fear. "Doctor," the child asked, "why aren't you scared when you fight?" Carla smiled gently. "Because protecting others is what humans do best. Fear is just another tool we use to help us do that job. She took a sip of coffee, grimacing at her burned hands. Now, who needs treatment next? The story of the Nexus Station incident spread quickly through the galaxy, but it wasn't the violence that made the greatest impression. It was the image of a human doctor, still bleeding from her own wounds, working tirelessly to heal friend and foe alike. Xenobiologist Yuki Tanaka stood before the Galactic Council, her presentation holoprojector casting a soft blue glow across the Grand Chamber. The curved walls held representatives from over 300 species, all watching with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. After the Nexus Station incident, this scientific presentation was humanity's chance to explain themselves to the wider galactic community. Distinguished members of the council, Yuki began, her voice steady despite the gravity of the moment. I'm here to discuss human physiological adaptations and their evolutionary context. The holoprojector displayed an image of Earth, its continents familiar to her, but alien to the assembled council. Humans evolved on what many of you would consider a deaf world. Our planet's radiation levels, temperature extremes, and atmospheric composition would be lethal to many species here. A Zalaxian counselor's crystalline form shinned with interest. Yet you show no signs of environmental protection beyond simple clothing. Yuki smiled. Correct. Human adaptation begins at the cellular level. The hologram shifted to show human DNA. Our genetic structure includes multiple repair mechanisms that. A harsh alarm cut through her explanation. The chamber's environmental systems were failing. Temperature indicators plunged rapidly as emergency containment protocols engaged. Chamber temperature dropping, an automated voice announced. Critical failure in climate control. Emergency evacuation recommended. Council members began hurrying toward the exits, their environmental suits engaging. But Yuki didn't move. Instead, she adjusted her presentation controls with steady hands. Actually, she said, her breath now visible in the rapidly cooling air. This presents a perfect opportunity for a practical demonstration. Her voice carried clearly through the thinning crowd. I invite those who wish to stay to observe human cold adaptation in real time. A handful of counselors paused their evacuation, curiosity overriding caution. The Zalaxian representative remained, along with several others protected by their environmental suits. Yuki continued her presentation as frost began forming on the chamber's walls. As you can see, my body is already implementing several survival mechanisms. She pulled up her BR ratings on the holodisplay. My peripheral blood vessels are constricting to preserve core temperature. My metabolism is increasing to generate heat. The temperature dropped below freezing. Ice crystals formed in Yuki's hair, creating a delicate pattern that fascinated the watching aliens. She kept speaking, her voice strong despite the visible shivers. Humans developed these adaptations because our ancestors needed to hunt during ice ages. She paced the chamber, demonstrating continued mobility. Our bodies can maintain cognitive function even as our extremities approach freezing. One of the counselors, a methane-breathing Chlorian, spoke through their translator. Your neural activity shows no degradation. How is this possible in such extreme conditions? Human brains evolved to prioritize function over comfort, Yuki explained, pulling up neural scan data. We can maintain focus through what other species might consider impossible conditions. This served us well as persistence predators. The chamber temperature bottomed out at -20 degrees Celsius. Yuki's presentation was now intercut with thermographic images of her own body, showing how it adapted to the cold. Notice how my core temperature has barely dropped 2 degrees despite the extreme ambient conditions. This is thanks to our efficient circulatory system and specialized fat distribution. A maintenance crew finally arrived, rushing to repair the environmental systems. As warmth slowly returned to the chamber, Yuki concluded her presentation with a startling revelation. What you've witnessed today isn't even close to human limits. There are humans who swim in Arctic waters, climb frozen mountains, and run ultramarathons in sub-zero conditions. We don't just survive extremes, We actively seek them out to test ourselves. The council session that followed set a record for length, as fascinated representatives peppered Yuki with questions about human capabilities. She answered them all with precise scientific detail, even as medical staff insisted on checking her for frost damage. The incident was later added to the official council records with a notable addendum. Human capacity for environmental adaptation exceeds all known parameters. Their ability to continue complex cognitive tasks under extreme conditions suggests unprecedented potential for operation in environments previously considered uninhabitable. Yuki's frost-covered presentation became known as the Winter Session and marked a turning point in galactic understanding of human capabilities. Though some found it disturbing that humans could function in such conditions, others began to see the possibilities. After all, who better to help explore the galaxy's harshest corners than a species that treated extreme conditions as a challenge rather than a barrier? Lin Wei surveyed the converted space station hangar with satisfaction. Her first Interstellar Cultural Festival was about to begin, and everything was perfect, or at least human perfect, which meant organized chaos. Holographic signs floated above different sections: Earth sports demonstrations, human culinary experiences, and traditional games. Miss Wee, her assistant, a floating orb-shaped Axioni named Pip, hovered nervously nearby. The Galactic Safety Commission has some concerns about the festival activities. Lynn smiled, adjusting her festival director's badge. Let me guess, they reviewed our schedule. They say several activities qualify as controlled substance exposure and voluntary physical stress testing. They're particularly worried about something called hot pot. Before Lynn could respond, her grandmother's voice cut through the pre-festival bustle. Grandmother Wee was demonstrating Tai Chi to a group of fascinated aliens in the station's variable gravity chamber. Her slow, graceful movements seemed to defy the shifting gravitational fields. You see, Lynn gestured toward her grandmother. Humans don't just adapt to challenging conditions, we turn them into art. The festival's first major event was rock climbing. Lynn had set up a massive wall with various gravity settings, allowing humans to demonstrate their climbing abilities under different planetary conditions. The alien observers watched in horror as climbers deliberately chose the most difficult routes. They're selecting paths that maximize physical strain. One Zalaxian noted its crystalline form flickering with concern. Is this some form of punishment? No, Lynn explained, watching a climber solve a particularly tricky overhang. It's entertainment. The challenge is the point. The culinary section proved even more bewildering to their galactic guests. Lynn had set up a traditional hot pot station where humans gathered to cook and eat while sharing stories. The aliens were fascinated by the social aspect but alarmed by the ingredients. You deliberately add capsaicin compounds, a Meridian scientist asked, examining the Siquan peppercorns, the same compounds used in some species' defense mechanisms. It adds flavor, Lynn said, enjoying her own bowl of extra spicy broth, and the endorphin rush is quite pleasant. The festival's highlight came during the sports demonstration. Lynn's team had organized a friendly parkour competition, with humans racing through an obstacle course that spawned random challenges. Aliens watched in amazement as participants adapted instantly to changing conditions, turning potential disasters into opportunities for creative movement. Their risk assessment algorithms must be malfunctioning, one observer commented as a human backflipped over a suddenly appearing barrier. Lynn's grandmother, still practicing Tai Chi nearby, laughed softly. No algorithm. We just trust our bodies and enjoy the moment. The medical station, required by station regulations, remained unusually busy, not with injuries, but with aliens seeking to understand how humans monitored their recreational stress levels. Lynn found herself explaining the concept of endorphins to a fascinated group of xenobiologists. You're saying, a tentacled physician clarified, that humans intentionally stress their bodies to trigger chemical rewards in their brains. Exactly. Lin demonstrated by offering a sample of extra spicy sauce to a brave Axioni. The resulting light show from their bioluminescent reaction had everyone laughing. As the festival entered its final hours, Lin found herself in the observation dome with Pip, watching humans and aliens sharing meals, trying simple Earth games, and even attempting to learn Tai Chi from her grandmother. "I believe I understand now," Pip hummed thoughtfully. "Humans don't just endure challenges, you celebrate them. You've turned survival adaptations into sources of joy." Lin nodded, watching her grandmother guide a crystalline Zalaxian through a gentle form. "That's what makes us human. We take the harshest parts of existence and transform them into something beautiful." The festival was later documented in the Galactic archives as the first successful large-scale demonstration of human recreational activities. The accompanying note read, "Humans appear to have evolved beyond mere survival adaptations. They have developed the unique ability to derive pleasure from activities that would trigger danger responses in most species. This transformation of stress into enjoyment may be their most remarkable adaptation of all." When asked about the festival's success, Lin Wei simply smiled and began planning the next one. After all, she hadn't even shown them skydiving yet. Commander Aria Santos stood in the quarantine zone of Meridian Prime, watching the swirling patterns of bioluminescence fade from the infected civilians. The void plague had struck without warning, attacking the neural pathways of every known sentient species, except humans. Now she led the emergency response team that represented the galaxy's best hope for survival. "Status report," she called into her comm unit, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. 30 more cases in Sector 7, responded Dr. Kim, her chief medical officer. "But the good news is the treatment protocol you developed is working. Recovery rates are up to 60%. Aria nodded, watching her team move through the quarantine ward. They worked without environmental suits, their natural immunity allowing them to reach patients that even medical droids couldn't safely approach. The sight of humans walking unprotected through zones marked as lethal had become a symbol of hope across the galaxy. "Commander," a weak voice called from nearby. A young Meridian child, their bioluminescent patterns barely flickering with life. "Are you really not afraid of the plague?" Arya knelt beside the child's bed, taking their hand. The simple act of touch, impossible for other species due to contamination risks, had become one of humanity's most powerful tools in fighting the pandemic. "No, little one. Our bodies are pretty amazing at fighting off infections, and right now, that means we can help you fight too." She squeezed their hand gently, watching as their patterns brightened slightly at the contact. A commotion at the ward entrance drew her attention. A group of Zalaxian refugees had arrived, their crystalline forms clouded with infection. The plague affected each species differently. For Zalaxians, it disrupted their core resonance, threatening to shatter them from within. "Team 3, with me?" Aria commanded, running toward the new arrivals. She reached them, just as one Zalaxian's resonance became critical. Without hesitation, she pressed her hands against their crystal surface, using the electrical conductivity of human skin to help stabilize their frequency. "How?" the Zalaxian whispered as their resonance steadied. "The energy transfer should be fatal to organic matter." Aria smiled, even as her palms blistered from the contact. "Humans are pretty good at taking what should kill us and turning it into something useful. Dr. Kim, get me some bandages and prep the resonance chamber." Hours blended into days as the crisis continued. Aria's team worked continuously, their human endurance allowing them to push far beyond normal limits. They developed new treatments based on their unique biology, using modified human antibodies to help other species fight the plague. The turning point came when Aria made a startling discovery. "The plague isn't just attacking neural pathways," she announced during an emergency council briefing. "It's trying to prevent different species from working together. But human neural patterns, they're acting like a bridge, helping other species' immune systems communicate and adapt." The implications were enormous. Humanity's notorious adaptability wasn't just helping them survive, It was teaching other species how to adapt as well. The plague had evolved to exploit the genetic isolation of different species, but it hadn't counted on humans' ability to bond with and protect other forms of life. In the end, it was this discovery that led to the cure. Human neural patterns, mapped and modified for each species, became the template for a universal vaccine. The plague had tried to drive the galaxy's species apart, but instead, it had revealed just how essential human connection could be. 1 month after the crisis began, Aria stood before the Galactic Council again. Her hands were still scarred from treating Zalaxian patients, and exhaustion lined her face, but her voice rang with pride as she delivered her report. The plague taught us something important, she concluded. Humans aren't just immune to it, we're immune because we evolved to connect with other species, to adapt and help others adapt. What looked like a weakness to the plague turned out to be our greatest strength. The Council's response was unprecedented, a standing ovation from representatives of every species. The Void Plague crisis had transformed humanity's image in the galaxy. They weren't just survivors anymore. They were protectors, healers, and living proof that adaptation was stronger than isolation. Marina Takeshi's presentation chamber in the Galactic Council headquarters looked more like an Earth museum than a diplomatic office. Interactive holograms displayed Earth's various biomes, while environmental simulators recreated everything from Arctic winds to tropical humidity. After the Void Plague crisis, understanding humans had become the galaxy's top priority. The key to understanding humans, Marina explained to a group of alien scientists, isn't in our current capabilities, but in the journey that created them. She gestured to a hologram of prehistoric Earth. Our planet tried to kill us countless times. Instead of dying, we turned each challenge into an advantage. A Meridian researcher raised a tentacle, like your radiation resistance. Marina smiled, activating the solar simulation. Exactly. Earth's magnetic field occasionally weakens, exposing the surface to cosmic radiation. Most species would have gone extinct. The hologram showed early humans developing melanin. We turned that radiation into vitamin D production. Literal sunlight became part of our biology. She moved through the exhibits, each one revealing how human quirks emerged from survival necessities. The temperature chamber demonstrated how sweating, considered a horrifying waste of water by most species, allowed humans to outrun faster prey through exhaustion hunting. But the most remarkable adaptation, Marina continued, wasn't physical at all. She pulled up neural scans from various human activities: fighting, creating art, solving problems, caring for others. We developed pattern recognition so sophisticated that we can't turn it off. We see faces in clouds, stories in stars, and potential friends in any species we meet. The chamber's main door opened, admitting Marina's surprise guest. A juvenile Zalaxian glided in, their crystalline form still slightly clouded from their recent bout with the Void Plague. Marina had helped treat them during the crisis, and they had formed an unexpected bond. "This is Spark," Marina introduced them. "They've agreed to help demonstrate something unique about humans." She turned to the young Zalaxian. "Ready for our experiment?" Spark's crystal form brightened with excitement. Marina placed a simple puzzle box on the table between them. "Now watch carefully," she told the observers. What followed wasn't just puzzle solving. It was a dance of communication between two radically different species. Marina and Spark developed their own language of taps, lights, and gestures. The aliens watched in fascination as human and Zalaxian worked together, neither species entirely understanding the other's thought process, but both adapting moment by moment. This, Marina explained as they solved the puzzle, is humanity's true superpower. We don't just survive, we connect. We look at something completely alien and think friend. She brought up historical footage, humans rehabilitating injured animals, teaching sign language to other primates, domesticating wolves into dogs. Every seeming weakness in our evolution came with a gift. Our pattern recognition made us paranoid, but it also made us see intelligence everywhere we looked. Our adaptability made us restless, but it also made us endlessly curious about other life. The chamber's environmental systems cycled through Earth's seasons as Marina continued. We became apex predators not through strength or speed, but through our ability to understand and predict other species. When we reached for the stars, we naturally applied that same ability to every alien we met. Spark added their own observation, their crystalline form pulsing with colors that the translator rendered as, "Humans look at the impossible and say, let's try anyway." During the plague, Marina couldn't understand my crystalline structure, but she still found a way to help stabilize it. Marina nodded, pulling up one final display, a real-time map of human-alien collaborative projects across the galaxy. We evolved on a world that taught us two seemingly contradictory lessons. Everything is trying to kill you, and everything is worth trying to understand. The session concluded with an unprecedented event. The alien scientists requesting permission to establish ongoing research partnerships with human institutions. As they filed out, many stopped to interact with Spark, attempting to mimic the communication methods they had observed. Marina watched them go, noting how each species adapted human gestures to their own forms. The Meridians used their bioluminescence to approximate human expressions, while the Methane brothers modulated their gas exchanges to mimic glass. "You see," she told Spark, "they're doing it too now, looking at something alien and thinking friend. Maybe that's not just a human trait after all. Maybe we just needed to remember how." Catalina Ortiz stood at the viewport of the Guardian Fleet's flagship, the Terran Hope, watching emergency teams deployed to the surface of Proxima II. A massive solar flare had destabilized the colony's protective shields, threatening millions of lives. 6 months into her role as High Guardian, she had already faced more crises than her predecessors had seen in decades. "Status report," she called out, her voice carrying across the bridge where humans worked alongside various alien species. "Radiation levels are beyond safety parameters for most species," reported First Officer Kai, a Meridian whose bioluminescent patterns pulsed with concern. But the human teams are already on the ground. Through the viewport, Catalina watched her people at work. Human emergency responders ran toward danger zones that would kill most other species instantly. Their natural radiation resistance, once seen as terrifying, now made them perfect for rescue operations in hostile environments. "High Guardian," a voice called from communications. "The Zalaxian embassy is requesting immediate assistance. The solar flare is affecting their crystalline architecture." Catalina pulled up the colony's layout on her neural interface. Team 3, redirect to the Zalaxian sector. Remember, they'll need physical stabilization. Use the techniques we learned during the Void Plague. She watched as human teams sprinted across the irradiated surface, their bodies adapting to conditions that should have been lethal. Each carried specialized equipment developed through the marriage of human endurance and alien technology. "Remember when they thought we were monsters?" Her second-in-command, Miguel, commented with a slight smile. "Now look at us." Catalina nodded, remembering her own journey from feared species to High Guardian. The same traits that had terrified the galaxy: human adaptability, persistence, and ability to function in lethal conditions, had become their greatest gifts to the galactic community. A sudden tremor shook the ship. Solar prominence detected. Kai announced, their patterns flashing warning colors. Secondary flare imminent. "All teams, prepare for impact," Catalina commanded. She watched as her human crews didn't retreat but instead moved faster, working to strengthen colony defenses before the next wave hit. The second flare struck with devastating force. Colony shields flickered, and for a moment, it seemed they might fail completely. Then something remarkable happened. Human emergency teams began linking their portable shield generators, creating an impromptu network that supplemented the colony's defenses. "They're using their bodies as conductors," one of the alien observers noted with a mixture of horror and admiration. "The energy transfer should be fatal." "That's humanity for you," Catalina replied, pride evident in her voice. "We see impossible odds as a challenge to overcome." Hours passed as teams worked tirelessly to stabilize the colony. Humans sustained injuries that would have killed other species, their bodies healing even as they continued working. Their legendary endurance, combined with their ability to operate in lethal conditions, proved decisive. Finally, the crisis passed. As emergency teams returned to the ship, Catalina made her way to the medical bay. She found her crews being treated for radiation burns, physical trauma, and exhaustion, all while planning improvements to their rescue protocols. High Guardian, a young Zalaxian diplomat, approached her, their crystal form vibrating with emotion. Your people, they ran toward danger without hesitation. They used their own bodies to shield our children. Catalina smiled, remembering her own first experience seeing humans in crisis response. That's what we do. The same traits that let us survive Earth's challenges now let us help others survive theirs. Later in her report to the Galactic Council, Catalina summarized the day's events. What you once feared about humans, our ability to endure lethal conditions, our drive to protect others at any cost, our capacity to adapt to any challenge. These aren't curses. They're gifts we were given to share with the galaxy. We're not monsters, we're guardians, and we're just getting started. The council chambers, once filled with species that feared human potential, now stood united under human protection. The most terrifying species in the galaxy had become its greatest defenders, proving that sometimes the most frightening traits can become the most precious gifts. After all, Catalina concluded, watching her teams prepare for their next mission, the best guardians are the ones who run toward danger while others run away. And humans? We've been running toward danger our entire evolutionary history.